Hi everybody, and welcome to YMP TV, where we pick the brains of successful business leaders in the resource industry. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by acQuire Technology Solutions CEO, Alison Atkins. Welcome, Alison.
Thanks, Hamish.
For those who are not in the know about acQuire, could you please just provide a summary of what acQuire is and what it does?
Certainly. So acQuire, we're a technology company. We were founded in Australia and we develop information management solutions for geoscientists globally. And what that means is we provide the capabilities for geoscientists to collect information in the field, right through to QAing the information and then serving it to third parties to consume the data. So the entire chain of data collection through to interpretation.
Yeah, very good. And what is your journey to become CEO of acQuire?
I guess if you'd asked me this whether or not I'd be the CEO of a technology company, I probably would have laughed to whoever asked the question. I started my career as a geologist working in Western Australia, and primarily every position I've had through my career has been through relationships and connections. I started my career ultimately through a connection that enabled me to become a receptionist for a mining company whilst I was still at uni, and then worked for that company as soon as I graduated through relationships there, worked overseas in Africa for a while, and came back to Australia during one of the many mining cycles, downturns in the industry. I've seen a few, unfortunately, in my life, and decided to do something different. So I decided to go back to uni again through connections. I was introduced to the acQuire team and started working for acQuire. So initially starting off in a role as what we call a geoscientific data analyst. So essentially my role was to implement the technology because I had the geoscience background, but I also had the technical skills based on the postgraduate I just completed to provide the service and support. And subsequently, I've been with acQuire nearly 20 years, much longer than I ever thought I would have been in any one position or one organisation. And through that time have progressed throughout the organisation into leadership, account management roles, team management, and then subsequently into the CEO role in the last 2 years. So it's been an eventful time, and ultimately one that I've been amazed with over the years. But I've constantly progressed and grown within the organisation to become the CEO.
Yeah, definitely sounds like an eventful journey to there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess. And now it's eventful times. We have COVID going on, and I can't not ask you a question about COVID. acQuire being an international global organisation, you have many offices around different continents. So has it been difficult managing COVID around the different offices? How have you gone about that?
I guess we have the advantage of being a technology company. So we had the infrastructure set up in place for anybody in our organisation to work from home for a variety of different reasons pre-COVID. Back in March, we made the decision very early on to ask everyone to work from home. And this was primarily to minimise the risk to all of our employees. And this was globally as well. So back in March, we made the decision, and then 2 days later, everybody was working from home. Our infrastructure was in place. It made it very easy for everybody. And it's been a fairly good experience for us. Being a global organisation, we are having to approach things differently in each region. We have 2 offices in Australia, one in Perth and one in Brisbane. We also have another in Johannesburg, another one in Santiago in Chile, and also in Calgary in Canada. So each country is dealing with COVID in different ways, and the personal and organisational impacts are different in each of those. One of the core things within acQuire is we're very much focused on being a values-driven organisation. One of our key values is work as one. So we've implemented strategies that are aligned across the entire organisation. And that means whatever processes we're putting in place in Australia with our Perth and Brisbane teams, we're implementing in South Africa, in Chile, and also in Canada as well. So for us, primarily, it's been a fairly simple transition with COVID, but we are cognizant of different regions and what their impacts are Interestingly, we have our annual quorum tomorrow, which is similar to an AGM. And normally we would get our teams together, which we can in Perth, given the current situation of where we are in the COVID journey. But we've decided to do everything online to ensure that there's empathy and consistency across all our regions. This is something that we hold dear to everything we do, is ensuring that everyone gets the same experience within the organisation. From a COVID perspective, I mean, we're ensuring that we're covering every base already, and to some extent people may perceive it as being overly cautious, but we want to ensure that we've covered every base and that at utmost in everything we do, our employee safety is number one. From a business perspective, again, being a technology company, we've had less of an impact than other organisations across the globe and other industries. Unfortunately, in tourism and hospitality, they've probably been hit the worst. We're a technology company closely aligned with mining. And mining is an essential industry in literally every country that has mining as their revenue centres. So we've been quite lucky to be aligned with an essential business or an essential industry, but also being a technology company, a large percentage of our revenue is based on relationships and what we call recurring revenue, which is maintenance. And again, we have quite a robust product that allows us to ensure that our customers are still receiving what they need, even during this downtime due to COVID. Also, one of the key things with acQuire is we work in an industry that's very much boom and bust. And we've been through many up and down cycles in the industry. And this, as much as this is a global pandemic, is very similar to other down cycles. One thing we've built into our organisation is resilience. And this is something that you'll see across the entire mining industry, is resilience and how we're approaching and adapting this. So on the whole, acQuire is doing reasonably well, given the current situation. And we're putting strategies in place to ensure that our staff and the wellbeing of our staff are maintained and looked after, but also as a business, we can continue to work business as usual. And that's the, I guess, from a customer experience perspective, we're seeing.
Yeah, very good. You can really see the advantages of being a technology company. And as you said, the mining industry, especially in Australia, it's going really well at the moment. Obviously, the other industries aren't going so well, but yeah, it's interesting to see how acQuire is coping with that. Yeah. So being a technology company and the CEO of a technology company, do you have any opinions on the mine of the future? And you recently wrote an opinion piece referencing a PwC report. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, and I guess this is fairly aligned to what you're seeing with the response with the mining industry as a whole, based on the COVID pandemic. People are working in more remote locations, but there's also essentially a lot more disconnectedness across those organisations or across the communities they're working in. So you'll see with COVID at the moment, and also where we're going with technologies and the industry as a whole, looking at adaptability and flexibility. And so that means looking at different ways to connect, and whether that's connecting from a people perspective. So you'll see a lot of organisations that are working from home. So if they're working from home, what does that actually mean to their processes within the organisation or on that mine to ensure consistency? So automation is probably the biggest one that we're seeing at the moment. And there are organisations doing this at present. So you'll see remote boggers sitting in Perth operating mines throughout the world, but I guess I'm going to talk from Western Australia's perspective. So you've got the Rio Tintos, etc., where they have their staff living in Perth, working in Perth, but working essentially machinery that's out on site. And you're going to see more and more of a prevalence of that, particularly with what's happened from the pandemic. I think it's going to push things a lot, push things forward a lot more, where they're looking at technologies to enable that flexibility for staff. You're also seeing connectedness. Now, I mentioned before, there's connectedness of the people, but there's also connectedness of the systems. One of the key things you'll see that's becoming more and more prevalent is the types of data that mine sites or exploration projects are collecting. Historically, when I was a geologist quite a few years ago, I'd be out there with pen and paper logging a hole, and that would be the primary data source. When you look at what's happening in the industry now, there are so many other data sources, and with sensors and scanners, photogrammetry, lots of imagery down holes, there's so many disparate data sources that mining companies are collecting. And again, looking at automation and health and safety, there's a lot of data that's being collected. So again, it's looking at what companies are doing with that data, how they're optimizing the information, and the connectedness between the different data sources as well. So connectedness is definitely something that we're seeing more and more prevalent. There's loads of startups in the industry that are, again, capitalizing on where the gaps are within the mining space. So as they come forward, how do then they relate to the core business systems, which acQuire and GymSuite, our product, is? How do they relate to those and serve the information to those core business systems? The other trend that we're seeing more and more is, again, around web and mobile. So smaller devices, smarter devices, how people are collecting information, how they're accessing information. So there's different things that we're already starting to become more prevalent across the industry that are becoming fast-tracked based on COVID, but also, I guess, more aligned with where the industry needs to go as a whole. FIFO is definitely something that's very topical across the globe, and the personal impacts of employees. So looking at different ways that organisations can optimise their mines, but also look after the well-being of their staff. So again, looking at different ways that staff can work remotely. But again, we're in an industry that's extremely resilient, and this is a key topic that was in the PwC report as well. Adapting and changing and looking at what we need to do, not only to get through this current state, but looking at where we're going into the future. And this is something that we at acQuire have done for quite a while. Our roadmap is always looking at the future. We're always looking at where the industry is going and trying to be ahead of the curve when we're developing technologies. So we've always had strong relationships with third-party vendors from a connectedness perspective. So interoperability or connections are very important to how our technology works with other systems, both from the collection stage, but also from the push or interoperability with your mine planning or consumption stages. So for us, we've been at the forefront from a connectivity perspective, being agnostic with lots of different technology organizations. But with subsequent releases of Arena, which is a component within our product GymSuite, we're looking more at the web, we're looking more at the mobile devices. So we've, again, ahead of the curve, looking at what we can do to give more flexibility to our customers. We'll be transitioning over the next few years, multiple iterations to get to a solution that's predominantly web, but ultimately ensuring that the customer's getting what they need and reducing the time it takes as well. It's an interesting thing. I was watching a presentation a couple of months ago. The geologist is becoming a data scientist, and that's just one role. So again, other roles in the industry are changing as well, but the roles within the organizations are changing as well. So when you look at the mine of the future, which is a big bucket term, but ultimately the roles that are required and what the positions are doing are evolving and changing as well. So there's a lot more data, there's lots more consumption of that data. There are a lot more positions around machine learning, data analytics that are coming into play as well. These will become more and more to the forefront as well. So it's an interesting time, and it's something at acQuire we're pretty keen to ensure that we're at the forefront of what we're doing with our development. We attend lots of conferences, we read lots of papers, we're engaging, we partner heavily with our key organizations as well as we're developing the technology. So yeah, it's an interesting time for the entire industry, and I'm keen to see what happens in the next 20. There's been a lot of changes in the last 20 plus years I've been in the industry, so to see where it goes. But definitely connectedness, automation will be at the forefront for everything that you see in the mining future.
Yeah, thanks for that. It definitely sounds like exciting times for acQuire over the next few years. And yeah, especially from what we've seen with the uptake of technology during COVID, yeah, it's exciting times for the mining industry as a whole. I think technology will be a big uptake in the next few years, definitely.
Absolutely. Also, I guess when you look at mines, we're having to mine deeper in harsher terrains, explore seabeds. I mean, there's a lot of interesting conversations around mining in space. So just, again, thinking outside the box in how we're doing things. So again, the mine of the future might not necessarily be what we're currently experiencing. It could be underwater, in space as well. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting time to be in this industry, but also looking outside of our industry to see how things are happening and how different industries are innovating as well, because there's a lot we can learn external to the mining space with how we adapt and evolve.
Yeah, no, definitely. You mentioned before that geologists are becoming data scientists, sort of that's where the future is taking them. Do you have any tips for geologists or just young professionals in general who are wanting to take that next step into management and wanting to grow in their skills and in their leadership? Do you have any advice for those young professionals?
I guess one of the key ones is seek out mentors. Seek out mentors within your organisation, but also seek out mentors external to your organisation. I've been quite lucky throughout my entire career that I've had fantastic mentors, both within organisations and sought external mentors as well through different organisations. AusIMM, there's quite a few women in mining. There's fantastic organisations that have mentoring programs. So put your hand up to participate in those. That's probably the first thing. But also don't be afraid to go and seek out someone as a mentor. Connectedness is an important one. So branch out from a networking perspective. Use your LinkedIn profile, go to networking events, ensure that you're connecting with as many people as possible in the industry. Because every position I've had leading into and starting with acQuire has been through relationships and through personal recommendations. I've probably interviewed twice in my career for positions that have been advertised. So having personal connections and relationships is important. I guess another thing, it's being proactive with your professional career as well. So if you're aspiring to go into leadership roles, look at courses, look at workshops with regards to improving your people skills, your strategy skills, your team leadership skills. I completed a master's in leadership a few years ago, and it took a good 5 years working full-time as well. But it was something I'd committed to prior to taking on any leadership role in acQuire. But that was a personal decision for me. But there's lots of different ways you can do this. There's, again, through training, through networking, through books. Look at lots of different options and alternatives with upskilling. But have a clear plan also. And when I say clear plan, be adaptable and flexible with the plan, but also have a plan around what you want to do. So have a roadmap. Again, something we've done at acQuire is with the annual catch-ups, the hiring managers do talk to staff around what their aspirations are. So there's, I guess, the more tangible career path based on the position they're in and getting promoted and changing accountability and responsibility within that role. But then we're keen to understand individual people's aspirations as well. Do they aspire to be in leadership? Do they aspire to be in driving product direction? Whatever it is, it's getting an understanding of where people want to go. So if an opportunity does arise within our organisation, we have the ability of knowing who has the personal affinity and interest first, instead of going for what the default normally is, who's the longest company. We want to make sure that we get the best fit. So being vocal around your aspirations is pretty important as well. Sometimes if an opportunity arises, it's okay to step backwards in your career if the longer term goal is going to be achieved. Generically in the industry, jump from job to job to job based on a salary increase or based on a position title change. But sometimes that's at a detriment, especially in a boom and bust cycle. Be clear of what you want, and sometimes taking a side step or a step back will get you there faster in the long run than a direct correlation. I've had lots of different roles within acQuire, not necessarily aspiring ever to being the CEO, but always with the focus of wanting to take on leadership positions. So I was very clear with my hiring managers, with the leadership, the current leadership of acQuire back then, of where I wanted to go. So there was a lot of transparency. So I think it really is important to be transparent with your hiring manager, with your team leaders, but also talking to people outside of your organisation as well and looking at opportunities, but being pragmatic around what you accept, but also where you're going to go and being clear, but being adaptable as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. There's so many gems in there that people will take away. I'm sure. I'd just like to touch on the networking side of things that you mentioned, and that is one of the reasons why YMP globally started, is to bring people together to chat, to meet new people who you wouldn't normally meet. Like you might not know many mining engineers, you might not know many environmentalists, truck drivers. It's a way to bring people together, and as we all grow through our career, you will know these people who slowly move up into management positions. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I can attest to that. As a junior geologist, I worked on a starting entry mine, which grew to be quite a large mine and then went underground. So I have that fantastic experience of watching something go through feasibility into open cut and underground during that time. And I'm still friends with a core group of people from 20 plus years ago. Now they've progressed into a multitude of different career paths and industries, but we're all still connected. And the ones that are in the mining industry, we still connect on a regular basis. So don't the networks you're making today, because you don't know where that person's going to go. And in acQuire, that's something we leverage off quite a lot. Not necessarily the personal connections, but our business connections. A lot of our business is through reputation and it's through relationships. And that's something from a personal perspective, but also from a business perspective. So absolutely, I think YMP is a great initiative. It would have been great to have something like this when I first started, although we didn't necessarily have the systems in place way back then. But yeah, make the most of it. Be proactive with these things. Be proactive with the networks and relationships you're establishing now within YMP, but also external to that as well.
Yep. Thanks, Alison. That's some great advice there. And yeah, I'm sure our members will take it all the way and really enjoyed that feedback that you've given. Thanks for your time today. I know you're a busy person and it's tough to get a hold of you. So really appreciate you spending your time and speaking to the YMP, and hope to keep in touch and yes, see you at possibly a YMP event in the future, and we'll speak to you again.
Thanks for your time, Hamish, and also thank you for the invite. I mean, these things are important as well when you're in leadership positions, to give back. So it is important, and look, I greatly appreciate the invitation to participate in what is and sounds like a fantastic network as well. I'm happy if people wanted to reach out to me individually as well through the network to have a chat or just connect through LinkedIn as well. So feel free to do that. Thank you for your time and for the invitation.
Not a problem. Thank you, Alison, and we'll speak to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Hamish.